And I think, in defense of state wildlife agencies, I mean, they're in a tough spot, man. There's all sorts of technology, and it's tough to either write in or write out a particular technology because it continually changes. And, they're not in the business of writing a particular product in or out of the books. And it's tough for them. So I get that. And that's something that we understand and struggle with along with the agencies. But at the end of the day, Garmin, I assure you, went into this product category wanting to make a tool where hunters could be more successful and do right by the game you're hunting.
When you went to the engineering, one of the questions that I asked was battery life, and it's electronic, and what are all the failure points, and it's got this digital readout. What happens if that gets bumped or the digital goes haywire, it gets cold, it freezes? What if the battery dies in the middle of your hunt? As a skeptic, I'm expecting all these failure points. I mean, if you're walking around with a rangefinder in your pocket and a sliding sight, you are effectively doing the exact same thing that this sight does. It's just removing the need to pull it out of your pocket 25, 30, 40 yards. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowmen podcast. We're coming at you from Texas. Where are we in Texas?
Outside of Brackettville, Texas, about 20 miles from the Mexican border, I believe.
I keep spending a lot of time on the Mexican border the last month.
What does that mean about you?
I haven't crossed it.
Okay.
And I am here with Chad VanCamp, right? VanCamp?
Yep, I was just taking a drink.
At first I thought it was Band Camp.
I get that a lot.
But it's VanCamp. And then we got Ted Gartner. Is that how you say it?
That is correct.
Ted Gartner, both from Garmin, right?
Yep.
And we're down here in Texas shooting the new Xero sight, bow sight, which is, came down here to shoot it a little bit. And Ted, you reached out to me a while back, probably a few months ago, like maybe December.
Yep, it was about that time. And we just wanted to get, a few people together to kind of test this and kind of the product rollout. It was post deer season, but there's plenty of pigs down in Texas. It's overrun with pigs, as a matter of fact, and we thought that would be a good opportunity. People that have hunted pigs understand it. People that haven't, I think there's a lot of mystique to it. And it's one of those things where we came out and we're making bacon.
I shot Hogzilla yesterday.
Yes, you did,
which was awesome.
It was incredible. I've seen a lot of big pigs taken from this country, but nothing like that.
Gritty shot the biggest pig.
Yeah, for sure. It was
Lucky.
a nice hog.
Really nice hog. Big old tusks.
Yeah.
Is that what you call them?
That's what I call them.
Yeah. You're jealous, aren't you, VanCamp?
I'm the only guy that didn't get on the board. That's all right. I'm the only guy who didn't get on the board. But it wasn't about me. That's cool. But I didn't even get to see anybody loose an arrow either. Which I was not the good luck charm. Of the
we got some video. When Ted reached out to me, it was kind of cryptic. It was like, Brian, nice podcast. I have a question. We're doing something super secret at Garmin, and we'd like to tell you about it, but you got to promise not to say a word about it till after the ETA show.
Yeah, the attorneys kind of had to vet that a little bit.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where, Garmin likes to get in industries where there's, you may not understand that the technology, but people need the technology. We did that in dog hunting. Hunting with dogs about 10 years ago, GPS for them. And we like to get into markets and industries where there hasn't been a lot of technology and innovation. And that's kind of the birth of the Xero. We purchased a laser range finding company about, what was that, Chad? 2.5 years ago?
It was January of 2016.
Yeah. And, it was kind of purchased without notice, which kind of surprised me because anytime Garmin purchases a company, there's a darn good reason for it. And about 2.5 years later, we came up with a Xero bow sight. So I think it came out of the blue, and in fact, the Xero and at ATA when we announced that thing, I've been doing trade shows of all kinds for Garmin. So think about, whether it's marine trade shows or our automotive GPS. I've been doing trade shows for 15 years, and I have never, ever been as busy as I was those 2 days at ATA. It was insane. I got in there before anybody else, and I didn't have the keys to unlock all the zeros, and I had people 10 deep asking for it and getting mad at me that I couldn't show it to them. But it's just been crazy.
Yeah. So when you, after I said, I'll keep it a secret, you sent me some film. I was able to watch and get the concept, the idea of the Xero. And I watched that and I thought, wow, this has been kind of an expected technology for a long time.
Yeah, kind of a holy grail.
Yeah, but I have not seen it. We'll talk about it in a minute for those who are in the dark right now what the Xero bow sight is. But when I saw it, I was like,
I still think there's people in the hunting community that hasn't heard of the Xero.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I expected this on the market a long time ago. And yet it hasn't shown up. And then I also, being the skeptical person I am, I thought, this is a nice video. Probably doesn't work like this.
Sure.
So, but I'm always intrigued and want to learn new things. And so later, you brought up coming down here to Texas to test it with a group of outdoor writers, podcasters, bloggers, just to kind of...
And you.
Yeah, and just me. And then we'll shoot it and see if it really does what it says it's going to do. So here we are. And I'll have the group of us that have nothing to do with Garmin, and I should disclose that we're not paid by Garmin. I'm not sponsored by Garmin. This is just a trip I was invited on to test it, and that's what we've been doing. So I don't have any skin in the game other than I like you guys. But
you're not too bad either.
But I have a lot more loyalty to the audience, so I'm going to tell them if the site sucks or if it works. And we made that deal before I got here.
That's what we want. I didn't invite anybody here to give us accolades that weren't deserved. It was all about, you didn't see this site other than at a trade show. You've never shot it before you got down here.
Correct.
And literally everybody came on a plane. We picked you up, drove in from San Antonio, mounted it, and we started hunting, within a half day. And that's the way we intended to do it.
Well, and the thing is you can shoot something like that at a target range. Mm-hmm. It's not the same thing as trying to shoot an animal with it.
Right.
It's a real world experience. Yep. And in Texas, there was a lot of shot opportunities. Just the way Texas is, there's pigs everywhere. So all of us got, drawn on pigs and got shots on animals.
For those of y'all that have not been down to Texas, and particularly this part of Texas, it's incredible, all the game that's down here. I'm from Kansas, and people that come down here from Garmin are continually astounded by the amount of game that comes out. Everybody saw, shooter bucks. They saw plenty of pigs. They saw aoudad. They saw sika. All sorts of crazy stuff that's down here, and you just don't see those kinds of opportunities. We're hunting low fence, and it's
and by low fence, it's like 3.5 foot tall. It's like this is 15,000 acres.
The ranch we hunted was yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any critter on there can go over the fence.
Yeah.
It's basically free range.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. It's Texas. It is crawling with animals. They're everywhere.
Yep.
So it's a different place down here, man.
It is. Well,
it is not like any place I've ever been.
And it's 75 degrees. I don't know why I'm in a hoodie, but it's warm. It's just it's a different place.
So many pigs. So let's talk about the Xero, Chad. And I want to get into some background on it, but really quickly describe to the audience that may not have heard about the Xero site what it is, what it does.
So, in 100 words or less, it's essentially a digital bow sight that when you depress a trigger that you mount to the riser on your handle or your grip, it scans and takes a range for you. And when you let go of that trigger, it pops up the pin for that yardage to shoot. Now, that pin is not a pin that we create for you just by, out of thin air. You calibrate ranges just like you would a normal sight, but with our product, you don't have to calibrate 20, 30, 40. You can calibrate 22, 28, 36, 49, right? We just need to kind of understand a ballistic profile of your arrow, and then the gap pins we were able to give you by basically completing a curve between the known pins that you've given us. So
right. So most of the guys that listen to this podcast understand how to employ a sliding sight with a sight tape. And most of the time what happens is you get your sliding sight, right? Maybe it's a single pin, which is, if I'm just shooting at a tournament or a target environment, I love a single pin that's vertical, not horizontal, because then it doesn't block,
obstruct anything.
There's no obstruction of the target. And especially that helps me when I'm aiming at vitals. So you got the vertical pin, single pin, and I can dial that thing to 27 yards, to 63 yards, to 1 yard increments. And the way you set that sight up generally is, you shoot at 20, you dial it, you figure out what your 40 is, you plug that into, or even at other bow shops. A lot of bow shops, you can just put in the speed of your arrow, and then you can type it into an iPhone app or something.
Wait, so you use electronics for that?
Yeah, totally.
Really?
And it'll identify are you being smart, Alec? It'll tell you which sight tape you need. It'll print it out. You can print it out and then stick it on your bow. So like at No Limits Archery in Denver, we just shoot it through a chronograph. It says your arrow's flying at X speed, feet per second. Yep. And then you just type this thing in and they'll print off a sight tape for me. And it's pretty much dead on. So what you're doing is you have the same setup, basically. The software's inside this sight. So all you do, there's no need to print a sight tape. There's no need to add anything else to it. You also don't have a slider, single pin. What you have is you basically, like you said, you take a couple of shots. That tells it what speed your arrow is going, basically, what your ballistics are.
It's an electronic tape, basically, is what we're talking here.
What's cool about it is it's also a single pin. But there's no horizontal or vertical bar to hold the pin up. So there's zero obstruction of the target.
Right. I mean, there are LEDs in there that illuminate. And there's, they get down to like 9 thousandths in diameter inches. And
it's a tiny dot.
Super tiny. But if you crank the brightness up, the dot gets bigger. But if you take it down all the way, it's like a freckle in there. And, you basically, even the pin itself doesn't obstruct the target because it's so small.
Right.
But we struggled with, do we tell people it's a pin? Because in actuality, it's an LED.
It's a dot.
It's a dot. But we wanted, people don't really call them dots. People call them pins. And we want to, stick with the same nomenclature that people are used to. But it is not really a pin. It is a dot.
Right. So in practical use, I'll talk about that more with those of us that are not working for Garmin in any way.
What are you saying?
I just, would like to talk about it.
Fair enough.
What I would like to know is more on this podcast, because I have you two, that work for Garmin. And Ted, what was your role at Garmin?
Director of Corporate Communications. So I kind of handle all the PR, media, that sort of thing.
Okay. And VanCamp?
I'm the product manager for the Xero bow site. So,
are you an engineer?
I'm an engineer by schooling. My job now is not.
He's an engineer.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there's lots of technical engineering crap that comes out of his mouth, and you just nod your head.
Yeah.
So, honestly, I asked you, one of the first things I asked you when I met you, Chad, was, why hasn't anybody else built this site?
In my opinion, there's a couple reasons. One is it's difficult to combine the two in the way that we've done it. Another reason was that there was a patent that was held until May of 2017, and I believe it was originally a Browning patent, and Leupold, I think, purchased it or licensed it to do the Vendetta. And so until that patent expired, that space was really locked down because that patent was the idea of putting a rangefinder on a bow.
Okay.
So in May of 2017, that expired, and that opened the door for this product and the IQ, Define, and some others that have come out.
Now,
well, I can jump in here. The other reason is it's darn hard to do this. You know,
Right.
Garmin has thousands of engineers that are putting a lot of time and manpower into doing this. There's a lot of math involved here.
well, I told you, I've expected for a long time to have a bow-mounted rangefinder, right? You're at full draw, you range the critter, it says on an LCD, whatever, a reading, it says it's 47 yards. Now you just pin gap, you take your 7-pin or 5-pin sight, and then you aim and you shoot all in one. The idea of having a rangefinder that ranges it and then drops a
Calculates
pin,
the pin. Yeah.
and gives you one single pin at that 47-yard range, like exactly, all in one unit. I thought, yeah, someday, but I expected this incremental step where you get this really efficient bow-mounted rangefinder, and then you're still using an old-fashioned sight, right?
Yeah.
What you guys did, though, is you went the whole enchilada. So I can draw that thing back, push the button, it ranges the target. It says 55 yards. And as soon as I take my finger off, there is a 55-yard pin visible to me. I stick that on the target and shoot. I'm like, okay, how did you come up with this? And why did you go that far with it? Like, at what point did you get the concept fully fleshed out where you're like, okay, we're not just stopping at range finding, we're actually building the sight to actually calculate and give you the dot you need to be accurate, within decimals?
I think we never really even set out. It was never an option to have a fixed pin sight with a rangefinder. We started out saying if this thing doesn't work flawlessly with a digital dot, projected in from the side, no light ever projected toward a target, and a way to line things up and aim it.
And why not a light projected at the target?
Well, it makes you illegal in more states because even if you don't use it while hunting, you still have a device capable of projecting light. So if you have to turn on a visible laser to line up, let's say, your 20-pin at full draw to where the laser that you've illuminated is pointing, which is also lined up with the rangefinder's laser, you've now got this visible light issue. So we wanted to make sure that wasn't possible, to be legal in as many states as possible.
Because that's a misconception.
Right.
A lot of people believe that the sight's not legal because it's forward casting of.
Right. The way the light comes out of the side of the range finding housing, it basically hits an angled piece of glass, and every bit of light comes back towards your eye. And then obviously our rangefinder is infrared, so there's no visible light there. But it was also important for us to create a way that you could range not only at full draw but also at rest. And so when we get into a little bit more techie stuff, I can talk about the reticle and the primary pin that you use, and you've gone through that setup experience and you know what that's like. But that allows us to be able to, if you're not at full draw with a consistent anchor point, that's the only way to aim some of these other sites.
Yeah, we did a 3D course yesterday with the crew down here. We just went around guest yardages and took shots. And typically we draw, range it really quick, gives you your pin, you shoot. Like it's that quick. It just boom, 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 and you're in. You have no idea what range it is. You draw your bow before you even know. You push the button, you've got it, you shoot. It's that simple. And you were making fun of Lucas because he was not drawing first. He was calculating the yardage without the bow at full draw.
Right.
Just using it as like a traditional rangefinder.
And I do that. I do it a lot when I hunt because, I'm looking out here and I see this black bear that is here at camp that you can shoot, and not a real
3D
black bear.
target. By the way.
I was going to say, clarify that. I'm looking at a 3D black bear target.
But if this was a real hunting situation, that bear's a good poke away right now, right? I just want to know what he is. I don't want to have to come to full draw to find out. So I can just basically line up my reticle and my pin, and I can say, oh, he's 67 yards.
Right.
That's out of my comfort zone. I'm not going to take that shot. But at least I know.
Yeah, it's great.
What
It's
distance
great
he's
to
gotta
be able
close.
to
You use it like a traditional rangefinder in that regard.
Right, exactly. And it's nice to have that option. What were the difficulties in creating this? Because I can sit here and think, well, how do you get the rangefinder, especially when you got a bow at full draw, to point at what you want it? Like when I'm looking through a bino rangefinder or like a handheld rangefinder, I'm looking through a scope basically, or a binocular. So I'm looking at what I want, and there's a dot, and I can just line it right on the animal.
Right.
How do you do that through a peep sight and a bow sight, and then there's all this torque and stuff that happens at full draw? How do you get that all lined up, and how does it actually shoot? Because one of the things I was concerned with is, I could just right off the bat, I predicted this problem that I run too often, where I'm trying to range an animal and I can't get a range, because there's some brush in the way. There's something about it where it's a little far, and I just can't get a range on it. And I was like, okay, when I'm at full draw, where's the laser coming out of this thing? And is it where my arrow is, or is it, where is it? Because it's going to make a difference on when I'm aiming, if I can, follow the same path that the rangefinder.
Right. And so that's where this, the range finding mechanism is integrated into the side of the housing, to 2-inch housing
Of the sight.
Yep. And then inside of there, we've got, our pin strip of LEDs that project in from the side. But then towards the back of the sight body, there's this reticle pattern. And the reticle pattern is a circle, and then it's got a bunch of arrows around it that point to the circle. And the idea is that reticle pattern is bounced around and reflected in there. And when it projects off the glass that you look through, which is not magnified, it's just straight piece of glass, all that light bouncing inside of there makes that reticle appear like it's about a half meter in the forefield, but your dot's coming in straight from the side.
All right.
So basically,
let me explain it.
Here's what Chad is saying. What you're trying to do is that laser is a straight beam, just like in Star Wars, the Stormtrooper shot. Only these beams actually hit things. You are aligning your eye with the sight, and it's in exact alignment.
Right.
And that's part of the setup process. And the setup process is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, what you are doing, and every time you come to full draw, you're pulling back, you're aligning your peep sight and your eye and the sight itself with the dot, and that's where the arrow goes.
Yeah, so folks, if you're as you're listening, picture a donut with a donut hole.
Yeah.
Right? And
it's breakfast.
Yeah, and if the donut hole is not in the middle of the donut, you're not having breakfast. You're not aligned. And so when you look through that sight, you want the donut hole plugging in the spot in the donut where it goes.
That's a good way to put
when they line up, your rangefinder, whatever you put that on, once they line up, whatever you put that dot on is what you're ranging, and it's that fast. Coming to full draw, they kind of line up automatically.
After you set your pitch and
once you set it, that's how you calibrate it, right? And then boom, once it's there, you just come to full draw, and it's lined up, and you just put that dot on your target, and it says 47 yards.
And that, I think, is one of the coolest things about this site that I don't think anybody at Garmin realized until we started using it, is it insists that your form is the same. So every time you come to draw, that donut hole has to be in the donut, which means your form is identical to when you were on the range.
Well, that was eye-opening, because when you're in a ground blind or you're in a tree stand and you're drawing your bow, and you have maybe a glove on and a little bit of different gear. I came to full draw, and my donut hole was outside the donut.
This was last night, right, on Hogzilla?
Yep, a bunch of times it happened to me. The first day I used it, keep in mind, I set it up, one afternoon to go out the next day and shot a pig with it, a smaller sow. That thing, I was like, dang it, my donut hole is not inside the donut. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to get it in there. And the reality is that the way I'm holding the bow at full draw, it's torquing the bow in a different way than when so I come back to the target range, and it's perfect. In a target range situation, it's perfect. Then I sit in the blind a tree stand last night.
Around.
Yeah, and I'm aiming downward and stuff, and they're not lined up. I'm like, but with the bow, what that's telling me is that I'm not shooting the bow with the same form that I am when I'm on a target range. So
and you're going to have an inconsistent.
Yes, it's torquing the bow one way or another. So last night I was able to shift my hand just a little bit. Boom, the dots lined up. And I'm like, well, that's how I was nervous. I had to draw the bow with a bunch of deer and pigs around. And I wasn't gripping the bow the way I would, in a set controlled situation. Well, it forced me to shift a little bit, and boom. Now I know that my bow is lined up and I'm actually shooting it like I would on the range, which is really interesting because when you bend over and you shoot at different angles, it's easy for that
form to
to fall apart. And this tells you, if your donut hole is way outside your donut, you are really off.
Yeah.
That was an unintended consequence of the sight development and how you line up the laser to your eye. And all these testers that we've had, 50 plus people, within Garmin, we had, private testers outside of Garmin shooting this thing. They'd all come back and they would say, I don't know what it is, but I'm just a better shot with this. And I'd say, well, it's because you know the yardage. No, that's not it. Well, it's because you get the right pin to shoot. Well, no, that's not either because, I could just shoot a 20-yard pin and I'm grouping it great. It's not those unique yardages between gap pins. I'm like, well, it's no target obstruction. Well, that could be part of it, but I still feel like it's something else. And finally we realized that if you just get in the habit of just taking a quick squeeze at full draw every time, you make sure, you're going to get the range to the target, which you need anyway, but B, you realize your grip pressure is the same as it was from the last shot to, the next shot. And it truly lets everyone who shot it group tighter than they ever have before.
And everybody looks for that holy grail of a consistent form. When you first pick up a bow, that's one of the most important things that you can do.
Yeah.
This helps you do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can get my bubble straight and I can align my peep sight with my sight housing.
Yep. So
that, boom, I'm right in there. I can have my anchor point just right, and I'm still torquing the bow just a little bit.
But just a little bit at 50 yards makes a big difference.
Right, but I've been shooting a long time, and in the last couple of years I've had Aaron Snyder coaching me and some other great archers coaching me along the way, and so I shoot so much better than I used to. But for a new archer, I can see, coming up and being way off, and it's going to tell you, hey, dude, you're not anchoring in the same spot, or something's not right. And I'm very good at aligning my sight housing and my peep sight together and getting the bubble right. And that the donut hole won't be plugged if those things aren't right.
Right.
But once I get that all set, it still surprised me when I'm aiming down how much it was off. And by changing the torque on my hand there and where I was holding it with the grip pressure and stuff, it completely lined up. And I think at close range, this stuff doesn't matter that much. Whether you're, perfectly
close range and flat.
Yeah. But we're shooting some 60, 70-yard targets out there. Those things matter when you start shooting those ranges. So it's very cool. I was very skeptical at first. And, we'll get into it later with the other crew, but it actually did what you said it was going to do.
Right.
So I got to commend you guys for the engineering. So when you got into creating it, what were some of the like aha moments that you had?
Well, one was the reticle pin alignment and, ensuring that you're not torquing your bow. Another one was when we developed this curved adjustment system. It basically allows you, you still have to tell the site mechanically, this is where I want a 20-yard or 30-yard pin to be. But then the cool thing is those curved features that you use to align the reticle, you're rotating around that pin that you just set with elevation and windage, so that pin doesn't translate in space. It's not moving. So that once you get everything else lined up, you get the reticle and that pin that you set at some range of, say, 20. After that's done, then you just go through and you set up pins, which is cool now, right? Because when if you say, okay, now I want to calibrate a 40-yard pin, and we will predict the pin for you to shoot, and you'll shoot it, and, we do a pretty good job of putting you on the paper, but we're not going to be perfect. And then when you miss, you just tell the site, hey, I missed high, and then we say, well, how high did you miss? And then you say, oh, it was 3 inches, and then we adjust the pin from there. So you're not really guessing how far you need to move a pin up or down. You're just telling us how high you missed, and then we do it for you.
And to me, that's brilliant. I mean, how many times are you in your backyard or at a range trying to sight in a mechanical pin, and there's a lot of guesswork involved there, with moving that and then micro adjusting it, and did you bump it too far? Or you've got your Allen wrench in there, and this takes a lot of that out of it. It's a lot more precise. There's a learning curve there for sure. But once you get the thing dialed in,
I could sight that thing in about the same amount of time that I would sight in a traditional boat sight. Now that I know how to do it.
Right.
That first time, the reticle part was the most confusing and the most difficult
because it's different.
Yeah, now I see it and I've set it up. I'm like, well, that's pretty genius. But when I first put the sight on the bow and then tried to set it up, it was totally, the idea of it was I didn't grasp for a while.
Yeah, and I mean it's tricky, right? And I've helped a lot of people do it, and we put some videos out there on how to do it. We just need to get this thing in the market, and as archers start picking it up and getting dialed in, then they can help other archers, and archery shops will do the same. And it's you just have to be patient, don't get frustrated. The tricky part, right, is when you come back to full draw, we have these arrows inside there that are telling you like, hey, you need to move this way, or that way. But at full draw, you have to move your head around to see which way do I need to go.
Right.
Right. And then you just make incremental moves from there. But
before we go on, what states is it illegal in? It's actually...
You would ask me that, right?
There's about 7 or 8 states that our legal team has interpreted the laws that they think where it's not legal.
Okay. So looking at the map on your site where it's legal or not legal, it appears that...
Let's see if you know your state geography.
Oregon, Washington, it's illegal. Idaho, it's illegal. Montana, it's illegal. Colorado, and North and South Dakota. Florida, and Alaska. So it's cool. I mean, you can use it in Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Texas...
There's a lot
Oklahoma,
of bow hunters in the states where it's
Kansas.
legal.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's right there above Colorado? You got
Wyoming.
Yeah, Wyoming.
So you can use it in Wyoming.
Yes.
So I mean, there's quite a few states where, I wish you could use it in Colorado, Idaho, and Montana. Those are like three like epic states. But I got to tell you, I mean, I hunted whitetail. I hunted Arizona for coos deer recently. Having that sight on there would, make it a lot. I mean, would definitely increase harvest rates, definitely increase success rates, and that's one of the.
But would it decrease wound rates? Right.
Right. There could be an inverse relationship there. Yeah. When Fish and Wildlife officers go out or biologists rather, when they create tag allocations for a certain unit, they account for wound rates. And I'm not sure what those wound rates are. I've heard different numbers, but
I don't think anybody truly knows them.
Unfortunately, with archery, wound rates can be
higher than anybody wants them to be.
Right. And so yes, absolutely. The question is, when you increase accuracy with something like this tool, will you decrease wound rates?
You know what's interesting is I just got a survey from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, asking me, how many deer I shot this year, and they're just trying to gather information, and there wasn't any questions on there about we're not blaming you, but did you hit a deer that you didn't recover? Be a good question to ask, and if hunters were honest about answering those, we're not trying to shame anybody, but you'd give them some more information for sure.
Yes, yeah. Well, for sure, and we'll get into that some more on the other podcast. But I was just curious where you could use it, where you can't, because there's a lot of folks that
something about that. We created the Astro GPS dog tracking collar about 10 or 11 years ago, and it wasn't legal everywhere. And we made a conscious decision as Garmin. We're not going to be at the forefront of we're not going to hire a lot of high-powered lobbyists and go out there and try to change things. We want the hunters to do that. And if the hunters see that there's value in the system, we'll let them do it. And that's kind of, I think, our approach with the Xero. We want to give everybody accurate information so they know what it does and as importantly, what it doesn't do. And we think that if we have a successful product that helps people harvest more game cleaner and more efficiently, while still working within the regulations of the state, people are going to want that tool. Just like they compound bows and range finders and everything else. We think that the hunters are going to be the ones that decide whether or not.
Right. Yeah.
This lives or dies, and we think it's a great tool.
And most doing a review, of the regs, it's typically no electronics mounted on bows, period. Right. So even a guy in Colorado who wants to use a Tacticam or something of that nature, they can't use it, and all they're really trying to do is, they want to share their hunt. But it also, if you go back and review film, if you've got a questionable hit, you can go back and you can see how long should I give that animal. And to me, that's a recovery tool in and of itself that Colorado doesn't allow in some of these other states.
Well, often when you're out in the field, let's say you have a single pin slider sight, right? So you're accurate within, the exact yardage of your. So in the field, if you had the luxury of ranging everything down to its exact yardage, 43 yards, and to dial the sight, that's your most accurate shot. If you're a good shooter and you can execute a good shot and maintain buck fever, all that kind of stuff, as long as you execute that shot, that's the best shot you can make, is to have a pin set up exactly at 43 yards. Typically a guy has a 40-yard pin and a 50-yard pin, and he's got to hold high or low with the 40-yard. That's if he had time to range it, right? Right. And that comes with practice. You can get very efficient with that. I'm better than I've ever been. Aaron Snyder is uncanny. Most archers that I know, though, they don't have that pinpoint accuracy. The smaller the target, so if you're shooting at, a small deer, like in Texas, or Arizona coos deer, you're making a 30-yard shot on it. The difference between, for a lot of people, 43 yards or 45 yards is a wounded deer or a miss. You can have a serious, that kill zone's really small. Being able to have at every shot, having a precise yardage and pin to hold it's creating. So just from my firsthand experience here, it's absolutely creating like the the perfect shot for me because I can range the pig, can be out there 35 yards, and it'll tell me 35. I mean, so I know when I hold that thing right where I want it to hit, it just hits. That's where it hits.
Yeah. Yep.
With the sliding sight that I have now, I slide it from 60 on. Everything else I pin gap. So at that point, I'm trying to pin gap. And so that means, you're either splitting between your 30 and your 40 and floating it, or you're aiming, you're like, okay, when I split, my 30's on his back. So then you're aiming at his back.
You're guessing. I mean, it's an educated guess.
Well, it takes some time. Sure. Aaron's very, very efficient. And I've seen some archers that are like that. They've done 3D for years, that shoot every day, that are uncanny good. Most archers I know aren't like that. Yeah. When you do the Total Archery Challenge in the West, you pretty much use a rangefinder on every target. It's because it's just nowadays with the precision bows that people have, everyone walks around the course with a rangefinder and takes those shots. And it's encouraged because that's the whole Total Archery Challenge was there as a real world scenario for how people hunt today, right, especially in the West. Right. And that's how they hunt. They rarely guess, which, is, I think in a lot of ways better for the animal. If you're guessing, you could execute a perfect shot, but if you're off by 3-4 yards, it's a miss, or worse, a wounded deer. And it's just I'm not saying, I'm just pointing out like the reality of what we have today and the way we shoot. Well,
and the fact of the matter for me, if you shoot a single pin sight, and prior to the Xero I did, I was being flip earlier, but I'm generating that tape using a computer. Okay?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sighting out to 62 yards and setting my 62-yard pin. A computer does that for me.
Right.
So really, in effect, all the Xero is doing is taking that one step further, and instead of having to fumble with your wheel in a time of high stress where you may not have a lot of time, this gives you that 62-yard pin dead on.
Yeah. It's the same difference. I mean, if you're walking around with a rangefinder in your pocket and a sliding sight, I mean, you are effectively doing the exact same thing that this sight does. Mm-hmm. It's just removing the need to pull it out of your pocket. We were joking about it yesterday because, I can't count how many times Aaron and I have been in a situation where I'm either behind Aaron or Aaron is behind me with the rangefinder, and we're calling out yardage, 25, 30, 40 yards, while Aaron is waiting for the perfect shot. He'll be at full draw, right? And I'm calling out yardage, or the same for me. Right. He's done it for me a number of times. We needed a 2-person setup to basically achieve effectively what you've done, only this is even more precise because it's giving you the exact pin that you need, the exact yardage.
Sounds like you're saying you don't need Aaron anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't need Aaron anymore. But it's the same thing. It's kind of
still like you, Aaron.
It's kind of odd that it's kind of interesting that it would be illegal, but having someone stand beside you and range for you is not. It accomplishes the same thing.
Right. And I think, in defense of state wildlife agencies, I mean, they're in a tough spot, man. There's all sorts of technology, and it's tough to either write in or write out a particular technology because it continually changes, and they're not in the business of writing a particular product in or out of the books. And it's tough for them, so I get that, and that's something that we understand and struggle with along with the agencies. But at the end of the day, Garmin, I assure you, went into this product category wanting to make a tool where hunters could be more successful and do right by the game you're hunting. Right. And that's what this is about.
That's an interesting debate that we get into from time to time is increased accuracy with like lethality. I've heard various podcasters bring up the question about between rifle and bow. You have some guys, I heard Stephen Rennell on Meat Eater talk about his father, and one of his father's friends who just despised the idea of bow hunting because the lack of lethality. Certainly you can double lung an animal, hit them in the heart, and they can fall over in seconds. Other times you're hitting a quarter away shot, goes through the guts, goes through, one lung, and that animal lives for 40 minutes. It dies, and it's fatal. It was a very effective shot, but it's not like it got hit with a gun and then fell over. Mm-hmm. So lethality is a question, is an issue. Like for some people, with an increase in lethality, though, comes often a decrease in challenge, right? Like a guy goes out with a recurve, it's not as lethal as a compound or as a rifle. And meaning that often you're not having an exactly precise shot in exactly the right spot. Certainly if you hit an animal with a recurve with the perfect shot, it's going to be as effective as a rifle. But that's the whole point. It's primitive. It's not as accurate. And so you don't have the shot that's exactly right. So the lethality is much lower, but, and you have to get way closer to the target to be lethal. But what happens is it gives that animal a much greater chance of escape. I mean, it's much more in that fair chase vein, right?
Yeah, and this is not, I think we can all attest to the fact we all did the 3D course yesterday, and we all had zeros. That didn't mean we were in the 10 ring every single time.
But we were dang close. So here's the thing: when we did the 3D course, we'll talk about it again with the shooters, but we did a simple test. You did a simple test where we walked around and we guessed the yardage. Now, nobody here, I mean, Lucas has done a lot of 3D tournaments and archery tournaments and so forth, and he's competed, and so he's a bona fide archer, but he self admits that judging yardage isn't his strength,
suit, yeah.
Right? Not for me, not among this group, but I would say I try really hard and I work at it. I've been getting better at it, but walking around guessing yardage, it's an interesting exercise. Especially on various size targets and animals. If you actually go around and guess yardage, there's no wonder so many people are reliant on a rangefinder because, dude, it's like, it's so tough.
Right. And why do they have a rangefinder? Because they want to be more efficient.
Right.
And more successful.
Well, I don't want to wound an animal. Sometimes I'm like, is it ethical for me to be shooting at, 40-yard target, right? Is it ethical for me to be shooting at that animal? Because the question is, without a rangefinder, because I have one in my pocket, and if I pull it out, if I have time, I'll know exactly what that range is, right, and I'll make a better shot. Where if I'm guessing, but sometimes you don't have time. You've hunted 7 days, and here you are at that moment of truth, and it's like you have time to draw and shoot, and there's not much time to get that rangefinder out. And so you end up taking a good guess, using what skill you've developed, and sometimes you just guess wrong.
Right. And with a zero, that eliminates that guesswork. In that shot of a lifetime, yeah, when you've been planning for a year for this particular hunt, you spent thousands of dollars. You've got the time to range that animal precisely in a moment.
So I think it's cool, you guys have come up with a product that is innovative, that's new, completely, ahead of the game. And I can tell for me personally, after using it for the weekend, that the guessing yardage game is out the window. Mm-hmm. And getting a precise pin and being able to shoot, it's certainly going to increase. I can think back on multiple hunts this year where I would have been able to make a better shot on an animal with this setup. That's a big deal. It's a big deal. So with that too, I figure there'll be fewer animals wounded.
Which is what every hunter wants.
That's the goal.
But it absolutely should increase success rates. It should increase harvest rates, but I think it will decrease wound rates. And what that correlation would be, it's hard to say. But I think it's an interesting discussion to have, but not.
And that's a discussion that I think will play out over the years, and that fish and wildlife departments will figure out. And all we're saying is judge this product based on its merits and what it does and what it doesn't do, not based on speculation or armchair quarterbacking.
Yeah, actually get out and see. Because I noticed that whenever new technology comes out, Lucas has me freaked out like that boat is going to fall off that hook.
Yeah, it is.
It's not where I would put it.
Brian, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you calculate and print these site tapes out, do you check the accuracy of that tape all the way out to its maximum range?
I do, yeah.
Does everybody do that, do you think? Everybody probably should.
Well, I think a lot of guys can't shoot effectively out to the maximum range. Like, they wouldn't know any better.
I'm trying to steer you into another little tidbit about the site, is that we won't give you a pin beyond your max calibrated range. Right?
That's a great point.
If you're out to, if you're good out to 50 and that's all you've calibrated to, and there's, the critter, as you like to call him, walks out at 55, it'll tell you it's a 55-yard range, but it will say that's beyond your calibrated range.
We're not giving you a pin.
Right. So you've got to demonstrate that you can shoot that far and calibrate it before you'll have a pin that allows you to.
Correct. You've got to be willing to fling arrows and, lose a few or put them in the target to tell the site, yeah, I'm good here and I want to lock this in.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it goes down to the hunter. I mean, I've got mine calibrated out to 80, and I love flinging 80-yard arrows at a foam target. Would I ever do anything reasonably close to that on a live animal? Heck no. I mean, I'm man enough to admit that I'm good to 40, and that's all I'm doing. But that's up to the hunter. The scope's not going to make you shoot an arrow at all.
This year when I shot my elk in Colorado, it was like 72 yards. I ranged it. It was holding still, kind of just chill, eating some grass, completely broadside. Ranged it, dialed my sight, got to full draw. Those are precious seconds that could have cost me the animal. But I had it exactly set at 72. And so I feel a lot more comfortable that I'm going to hit exactly where I'm aiming. And sure enough, I executed a good shot and it hit exactly where I needed to. At that range, though, not knowing exact yardage, a lot of people, when they see technology like this, same with a slider and a rangefinder, their fear is that people are going to take shots beyond their effective range. And again, it comes down, like you just said, to the actual archer.
Yep.
And you won't change that, whether it's with this sight or whether it's a rangefinder in your hand and a slider.
Yeah.
It's virtually the same. It just eliminates that extra step. The worst thing would be for a guy to just go, I think it's about 70, and then shoot,
and then lob an arrow.
Yeah. Because when you're off by 1 or 2 yards at that range, most guys, it's going to be a big. It's going to be the difference between wounding the animal or missing it entirely. Yep. So it's pretty cool to have it set up like this, where you can just bypass all that stuff, get right to the shot.
Yeah.
When you went to the engineering, one of the questions that I asked was, battery life and it's electronic and what are all the failure points, and it's got this digital readout. What happens if that gets bumped, or, the digital goes haywire, it gets cold, it freezes, all that kind of stuff. What if the battery dies in the middle of your hunt? Like, those are things where you're just expecting, as a skeptic, I'm expecting all these failure points. As
engineers, we expect those too.
Yeah.
Yep. We hunt just like everybody else. We have the same concerns. So, the batteries, you have to use lithium. 2 AAAs. You get 25,000 ranges out of that, which for almost anyone, that's over a year of battery life. When the batteries get too low, we warn you hey, your battery's getting low. We have a battery indicator on there. If the battery gets too low, we just disable ranging. But you can still use it as a fixed pin or a single pin sight. So if you press and hold left or right, you dial up whatever manual range you want. Pin pops up good.
Yeah, it's something we didn't mention is this is a fixed pin sight as well.
Right.
With the touch of a button, you can switch from ranging to a fixed pin, and it's there instantly.
Yeah. Right. And as far as ruggedness, that was one thing that I was a little nervous about. But I tell people that this sight will take the same abuse that any mechanical sight will take. If you're comfortable in banging your spot hog or HHA around, you can do the same with this sight. So it's every bit as tough. The thing with Garmin is we engineer electronics for airplanes.
Right.
And we actually use a lot of the same testing protocols and the same testing that we use on our avionics where people rely on it at 30,000 feet. Mm-hmm. We put the Xero through the same tests. So there's a lot of testing that goes into this. And like Chad said, we're hunters. We don't want this thing to fail any more than you do.
Right. It's, in some respects, the battery issue is first of all, anybody can get a lithium AAA battery.
You can find that at a gas station.
Yeah. So it's, that's not a problem. But the other thing there is, I have run out of batteries in my Leupold rangefinder before, where I'm carrying that thing in my pocket. I use it for like 2 years or more.
Sure.
And I know the battery's getting low because it's telling me, but I'm like, it'll go. It's been 2 years. It'll go another month.
Right.
And then it goes dead in the middle of a hunt. And that's my own fault. With this sight, given the fact, it can last a year. You put fresh batteries in it on a hunt, there's absolutely no reason why it would go dead.
Well, the thing I like about the AAAs, too, and I don't know, Chad, you can probably talk to this better than I can, but it's a stroke of brilliance because my headlamp runs on AAAs. Mm-hmm. My flashlight runs on AAAs, everything. So I've got one type of battery that I can throw a spare set in my pack, and I'm off to the races.
So with the sight being running that way, what about, it's glass? Is it glass or plastic? What is the...
It's glass.
It's super clear.
Yeah, it's water repellent.
My one of the first things that came up was, what if it fogs up?
Yeah, and that just doesn't, hunting in wet conditions is difficult anyway. Mm-hmm. You look at it, but, our glass is water repellent, it's easy clean, and so water just beads up and runs right off.
And it's not a scope where you have or where you have gas trapped in there.
Right.
It is flat.
One pane of glass, so the temperature on one side is the same as the temperature on
the other. It doesn't fog up.
Right. Yeah.
And, and you can't hold your face close enough to it to, even if you had it, had lenses on both ends.
No,
you just don't use it that way.
No, it's so far. So I still got to test it a ton, right? But right now, it's impressive. It's impressive. It took me a little while to get used to an LED light, and I'm still messing with my preferred levels and how big I want the dot to be, how bright I want the lights to be. But with the simple switch, you can toggle it up or down.
Right. We have a light sensor that basically detects the light in your environment and adjusts the pin brightness based on your preference for that light in the environment. So, but if you're hunting in some weird situation like a ground blind where it's dark where you're at, but it's light at the target, you can disable that, and then you just dial up whatever brightness you want.
There's a ton of features that I haven't got into yet. I'm still learning the site. But I'll say this, so far I beat the crap out of everything. I've only used it a couple of days, but, Chad's over here going, that those, the front of that is like a range-finding lens, and you may not want to scratch it on all the rocks.
You're laying it on the concrete slab out here, and I'm like, dude, you're not going to lay your rangefinder down that way. But it didn't correlate to you.
Yeah. Well, it did.
Or maybe you try. Maybe you.
I checked it. It was a half inch from the rock, so we're good, dude.
You're fine. Yeah,
we're good.
Go ahead.
Chill out, Mr. Engineer. I got this. No, but
engineers can't chill out.
No, but seriously, I'm going to put it through those paces and see. But so far, it's held up pretty well. I can't attest to it by any stretch, but it has, that's the next step. Try to break it.
And we've been doing it. Part of our testing, we try to break stuff, and we sometimes do a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, I have a lot of people who've written in who are not happy with the price point.
Yep, I get that.
But you figure, okay, so a good rangefinder is
what's the PR guy going to say?
Well,
hit us with it.
And look, when we started talking about pricing, I thought that was high too. But my thought process.
How much is it?
It's $7.99 and $9.99.
Okay,
depending on the model. But when you figure a rangefinder's close to $300, nice rangefinder.
4.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Fine. We'll take 4. A sight, nice. Single pin sight. That's going to be at least $300. So there you're at $600 or $700 right away, and all this does is it combines some technology where you're not. To me, one of the biggest things is you're not wasting movement in ranging something.
I was telling you guys, I still will bring another rangefinder with me,
and that's fine. I still hunt with a compass.
Yeah, I would still use like my binocular. Rangefinder. To range like 400 yards. Sure. How far is that bull from me right now on that hillside? How much distance do I got to close here?
Right.
That kind of thing where I wouldn't want to use the sight on the bow for that.
We can get 100 yards to game targets, 300 yards to reflective targets.
Okay.
It's not intended to be navigational.
No.
Or how far away is that bull? By all means, you may still want to use a regular rangefinder for those types of activities, but it's designed to give you the range for the shot. Mm-hmm. That's the problem we wanted to solve.
Well, and it also gives you the opportunity.
He's doing that with his bow again.
I know, it's driving me crazy. It also gives you the chance to, but angle compensates and all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Which we talked about a little bit earlier. Once you get to extreme angles and distances, how do the calculations work? Because on this podcast, we've talked about it a number of times that there's not a rangefinder on the market that accurately gives you, an impact point, the yardage you should be shooting for on some of those distances. So something to look into.
Right. We talked about it yesterday. Where my theory is that you still take the cosine of the angle, but now you've got gravity essentially accelerating or decelerating your arrow at those extreme grades or angles. And that affects the drop.
Yeah, we'll have to get into that and
I look forward to working
and talk to your engineers because I'm curious about that. But it's getting the job done. I'm impressed. So we'll see if we can break it. See if it has some technical difficulty right when the biggest animal of my life steps in front of me, that kind of thing. But so far, it's been impressive. So I'm going to get the other guys on this show and interview them and talk about their experiences this weekend. There's so much more to cover. I would like to talk about, the whole process of getting this site on the market and stuff like that. So it'd be cool to sit down and do this again when we have more time.
For sure. We appreciate you coming down here. Again, we chose these folks to come down, not only because of their influence, but because we knew that you'd give us a fair shake. You'd give us an honest shake, and that's all we're looking for. We're not afraid to put this site out there and let people, like you said, test it, maybe try to break it. And that's what we want.
I feel like when it comes to technology, if the technology does not have a negative ecological impact, and it makes you more lethal, I don't outright want to just shut it down, because the whole idea is to have a quick, clean kill, clean harvest, effective harvest of an animal, do right by the animal, and to take care of the ecology
absolutely
around us. And so,
and I think every hunter is that way.
So I kind of draw the lines there. Then from there, it's like, well, if we want certain setups for certain seasons, I'm all for that. Like if you're like, well, I don't want a crossbow in my archery season because one's way more accurate than another or whatever. I think that's where you're like, okay, then you have a bow only season, you have like a 2-week crossbow season, and you have so I'm not into regulating technology if it's good for the environment, it doesn't hurt the environment, and it makes you more lethal. I say let it be illegal. Use it. That's the end goal, is to go out and kill an animal effectively. But I understand hunting opportunity, and it matters to me. If harvest rates with a traditional bow and arrow are, 10% in a unit, you can issue, let's say 1,000 tags for a certain area, right? Because your harvest rates are so low, you can give everyone a chance to get out and run around in the woods. Now, you're not going to kill very much. Most of the time, you're going to go out there 9 out of 10, and you're not going to kill anything, but you're going to be out there. Right? But if those harvest rates increase by 50%, well, your tags are going to have to decrease by a lot, by half.
We get that, but base that on science and on
biology.
Yes, absolutely.
Harvest statistics and the whole deal. Manage it. Yeah, I agree. And so to me, that's where that discussion rolls forward. It's like when it comes to technology, whether it's a GPS or map.
Well, we were joking about it yesterday. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There is a lot of technology.
I use technology. I'll use a GPS.
You can argue this podcast is technology in hunting. You're sharing information electronically.
Honestly, I think the things that have increased harvest rates more than anything are modern optics and rifles.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just flat out incredible.
Yeah.
And then if you're an archery hunter, again, modern optics. They allow you to find game that you would never be able to find in the past. And the other one is game cameras. I mean, if there's anything that has changed the landscape for killing animals, it's game cameras. People know exactly where those animals are and what they're doing. They get them pictures sent to their phone while they're sitting on the couch. Yeah. Oh, buck's out there. Yeah. The elk just moved in.
But let's not kid ourselves.
You're out there hunting the next day.
Yeah, I mean, but Google Earth, I believe, is another one where you can electronically scout
tens
of thousands of acres.
I can sit here and project exactly where that elk is standing on that mountain over there, and then I can actually go over to that projected point when I could never get there without that tool. So, I mean, all the technology is out there is there to increase success rates. The reality is, though, and I've talked about this a few times, I just don't think that success rates, at the end of the day, you still have to be able to get close. You still have to be able to execute a good shot. You still have to maintain, control buck fever. There's so much that goes into it. You have to have some fitness. You have to have, depending on the hunt, right? All these things come into play, and with the increase in technology, there's not these huge dramatic increases in harvest rates. They're just not the way you'd think they would come into play. So I think it's interesting because we would like technology to make a guarantee. Somebody wrote in and said you might as well be making heartbeat-seeking arrows.
Well, that's next year's product,
and it's like. It's hardly true. Like there's basically like in this case, and in most cases, even with an Onyx map projected point, you still have to hike over there. You still have to sneak up on it. You still have to play the wind. You still have to get in range to make a shot. Like it's not like these givens. Now, I will say that modern rifle and scope and electronics and projecting your range and shooting 1,200 yards, that right there. That is like a whole, and that's why tags are limited,
right?
For that hunt.
But I'm not going to get on that slope and judge people if they want to do that.
No, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Right. I mean, if you're effective and you kill an animal, you're more lethal,
right? And you're buying a tag, and you have to put some faith in your state agency that they've put some thought into that on harvest rates, and let those chips fall where they may. We're just trying to make a product that's makes hunters be more successful.
Well, my stance on technology still is the same. Does it have a negative ecological impact? Yes or no? There's certain products I think do. Like if you're throwing dynamite into the water to get fish, Okay, that technology probably not a good one because it just indiscriminately kills, right? Like it's negative ecological impact.
Well, I'm sure some of your hunters out there are also fishermen, and we get non-fishermen all the time. Garmin makes fish finders.
Mm-hmm.
They say, "Well, wow, it tells you exactly where the fish are."
You still have to catch them.
Oh yeah, you still have to catch them. It's the same principle here.
Yeah, I mean, so technology certainly helps, but it doesn't. It's not a gimme.
Yep,
it's just not a gimme. So, but this is hardly the advanced technology. I mean, it is, but it's hardly this giant step beyond a handheld rangefinder, which is an amazing piece of technology that nearly every archer uses now, and a sliding single pin sight. Mm-hmm. I mean, those things already exist and are used in virtually every state on every hunt. Now you've just combined it into that time-saving piece right on your bow.
Exactly.
Which I think will decrease wound rates and increase harvest rates. And to what degree, it's hard to say. But I think it's a pretty cool experiment. You know, throw it out there and you see. I predict that there won't be this dramatic increase in success rates because I know what it takes to get within elk in range of a mature bull elk. It's still tough.
It's a human challenge, and that's what we're in this for, right? I mean,
I'm all about that technology. It's nice to have that, and
when
it
you
will
get in that moment of truth,
it will help me.
Yep.
So anyway,
dude,
thanks, Chad.
It's been real. Appreciate you.
It's been a blast.
Thanks, Ted.
Appreciate it, man.
Yep. Stay gritty, folks.
Despite our ever-changing, ever-indignant world with its growing ignorance of and indifference to the ways of the wild, I remain a predator, pitying those who revel in artificiality and synthetic success while regarding me and my kind as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood. I stalk a real world of dark wood and tall grass stirred by a restless wind blowing across sunlit water and beneath star-strewn sky. And on those occasions when I choose to kill, to claim some small part of nature's bounty for my own, I do so by choice, quickly, with the learned efficiency of a skilled hunter. Further, in my heart and mind, I know the truth and make no apologies for my actions or my place in time. Others around me may opt to eat only plants, nuts, and fruits. Still others may employ faceless strangers to procure their meats, their leather, their feathers, and all those niceties and necessities of life. Such is their right, of course, and I wish them well. All I ask in return is no one begrudge me, and all of us who may answer the primordial stirrings within our hunter souls, my right to do some of these things myself.
What you just heard is a quote from M.R. James. We truly live in a world that is largely ignorant and indifferent to the ways of the wild. And although some regard us as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood, we have the opportunity to change the way these people view the hunter and the hunt. We can share our experiences and nature's bounty with those who employ these faceless strangers. And by so doing, we make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the wild animals in the wild places we care so deeply about. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting and the outdoors. Our wild animals and our wild places depend on it.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
Gritty Bowmen.